Hey, ministry leader, special treat for you today as I welcome Christian music recording artist Steven Curtis Chapman back to the podcast. Steven, what's going on, man? Thanks for hanging out.
Thank you for having me. Good to talk to you and good to be with you. Thanks.
So I have a story. About maybe a year or two ago, I was at a concert of yours, and this teenager or like maybe a young adult girl was given the charge of introducing you on stage, and it was, ladies and gentlemen, Steven Curtis Chapman. So see, if you were a one namer like Bono or Beyonce or something like
I
that,
know.
maybe it'd be easier on people.
Yeah.
But
believe me, I have thought that many times. Yes, I
yeah,
thought, man, if at the time it was I was just telling the story actually. There was another Steve Chapman when I first came to town to write songs. There was a Steve and Annie Chapman who were a duo in Christian music, and he was a songwriter. And so there was confusion as to if I was him or which Steve Chapman I was. And so my publisher and record label people said, you got to do something to differentiate yourself from this other Steve Chapman. So that was where Steven Curtis Chapman came from, which was just my name, my full name. But I have over the years wished I would have thought that through a little better because, even Toby Mac or Carmen, just something,
Carmen,
short and simple instead of this extremely long, name that takes a long time to autograph and sign. So, but that's what I got.
Well, I don't know if you still had Steve Chapman. I'm wondering if the royalty checks would have gone your way if they were to send to you, or I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe you gotten off a better deal.
That was the concern. It was like, dude, it might, it might have been.
Yeah. All right. So I had you on a while back when you were on your solo tour. So the brand new album that you have out now is called Still. The tour is in full swing. Tell me a little bit about how this project came about for you and maybe how this tour is a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, I think, in the process probably of that solo tour in some ways, and really that came from me writing my book, Between Heaven and the Real World, and kind of telling my story. And so, last time we talked, I was probably talking about that, just realizing, sharing my story and thinking, man, it'd be cool to do this with music and use the songs to kind of take people on the journey, the adventure, if you will. And then, that kind of led right up to, of course, we have a global pandemic and the world changes, for all of us in so many ways and still is changed forever. And I think during that time, there wasn't any expectation necessarily for me to write another album or record another full album of music. I mean, so much has changed in the music world of how people even consume and interact with music. Now it's streaming, and many artists don't even make albums. They just make songs,
Right.
and you release a song and maybe then a second and a third, and then eventually you have an album, but it's just all been so different. And so there was no expectation or real plan even for me to make another album. But during the pandemic and just so much that was happening in the world around me and in my own close in world of friends and family that I was walking through that with, and even lost a dear friend who toured with me for many years, Brian Green, who was my keyboard player, and then a brother-in-law who passed away very suddenly. It was about a 4-month battle with brain cancer. And those things happening at the same time all were stirring some things in me that the way I always have processed life and faith and wrestled with questions and come back to a place of just, all right, God, I got to trust you even if I don't understand what's going on. This is my only solid foundation and anchor is your promises, your truth, your grace. That started to turn into songs. And so then it was like, well, I think I want to make an album. I think I want to tell, because, and it really came down to that word still. which is why we call the album that. I really realized that I still, even now at 60 plus, I'm 61 now, you kind of hit that place where you start thinking, I don't know that the world really wants or needs another Steven Curtis Chapman song, much less an album. But I really, because there's a lot of them. There's plenty there, and a lot of new artists and amazing new music. But I think for me, these are songs that I couldn't have written 5 years ago, 10
Mm,
years ago, 30 years ago. These are things that I can only say now at this point in my journey. And I still want to do that. And I still have this passion and this, desire to just tell the story of God's faithfulness in my own life and journey, and sort of push away all those voices that might say, well, yeah, but, is it relevant? Is it, all that stuff that, the insecure artist that I
mm,
am will struggle with, but just say, I think it's important for me to share these things for whoever might need to hear it. And so that was really the idea behind this. And this tour now, is sort of that. It's like, man, I've never enjoyed playing music, sharing my songs, encouraging people more now than I do now. I mean, I've,
mm,
I've always loved it and been grateful for the opportunity, but I really enjoy it now. In a different way. I think just because of the journey that I've been on, the way it's connected with so many people. There's so many people that have stories and memories connected to my music. So it's just a really cool, night to get to come together and remember, as I've always said, not just where we've been, but where we're going.
yeah,
That's the
yeah.
beauty of the music I get to write. It reminds people where we're going and the promises of God.
Well, I think that's why people have connected. I certainly have connected to your music over the years. That it's kind of markers. We're on this journey, adventure together,
Yeah,
where you're
yeah,
where people can use it as markers. But you were saying one thing I want to hit on with that. Maybe we can speak to ministry leaders with that insecurity. Um, with
yeah,
new songs coming out, do you feel? I mean, do people always give you the, oh, but this is not like Great Adventure. This is not like, oh, I just want to hear that
yeah,
song. How do you wrestle
yeah,
with like
yeah,
the new stuff? Can God still use me in the new material? And
yeah.
how do you wrestle with that? And maybe how do ministry leaders wrestle with that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a very real, thing that you're hitting on that I have battled with and continue to. I mean, it's that thing of just people will say, if I write a new song and, and kind of offer it up, hey, here's a new song. So many times people, they mean it as a compliment and as an encouragement, but it doesn't, it's hard to receive it that way because sometimes people say, man, hey, that's really good, but gosh, you know what song of yours that, there's never going to be another fill in the blank. Man, you're
Mm-hmm.
Great Adventure, you're Speechless, you're, More to This Life. Man, that was the record that for me defined Stephen Curtis Chapman.
Right.
And it's such a high compliment, but what I hear in that, in the insecurity is, so you really didn't need to waste your time writing that new song because I really just want to hear you sing The Great Adventure, or
Mm-hmm.
I Will Be Here or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's a real, in a way it's a battle, which is it's silly. And you kind of find yourself going, man, why does that matter? To me, why does that hit me as a discouragement when I know they mean it as an encouragement? But it's just the human nature, that part of us,
Yeah.
certainly of me, that says, but man, this is the thing that's fresh and new and right out of my heart for where I am now. And what you're kind of saying is, man, I just sing the good old songs, sing the
Mm-hmm.
the hits from the past. And yeah, and it's like, man, I'm thankful that I have those. What a blessing, what a gift. And maybe they're right. Maybe I don't need to bother with, writing new songs. But then you have these new things that you want to say, and that may not be as relevant to to a large number of people, but it still matters.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
so it's a oh, I lost my earbud. It's important. And I think for any of us in ministry, well, where'd it go? Um, you know, those are some of the things that we are gonna, we're probably gonna battle with uniquely.
Mm-hmm.
Is because I don't know that we would do. There's a part of why we do what we do, and it's not bad. Um, there's something in us that wants to connect with people. There's some part of it that is a people pleaser. We want people to be pleased, moved, inspired, encouraged by what it is we do. That's what got us on a stage, doing at some level what we do. And how we steward that, for those of us who are, leading people in worship, trying to lead people closer to an understanding of the gospel, of God's grace, of God's love, of His worth of our worship, and all of those things that we ultimately want to do. There's some part of that in us that is, man, I want this to connect with people. Otherwise, I'm missing the mark. And
Yeah.
so it's a natural thing, I think, to feel like, oh man, I have these things in me as a creative and as a co-creator that God has put in me to get to create. But, if what I'm creating isn't, you're not receiving it, or you're saying, well, just sing those old songs.
Yeah.
It's going to be a battle. I think it's just going to be something we kind of wrestle with and lay it back down and say, okay, God, I'm going to try to steward what you've given me and be faithful with that. And you do with it what you want. And it won't always be as big, and it won't always be as effective. But I mean, I had somebody this morning telling me in an interview that, man, your song, uh, Unfixables, on your new album, like, we've had several callers just say, man, that song has really impacted me. And so they were playing it, and it's like not a single, it's not, and I'm like, thank you. It
Yeah.
was so good, because
Yeah.
I'm like, that song was really important to me, but it's kind of a deep cut that you wonder, did anybody even listen to that song?
Right.
So
Yeah.
you never know. I guess that's the thing I'd say to worship leaders too. You just never know how God's going to use it, even if it doesn't feel as impactful, impacting in a big way. Just be faithful to steward what God's given you.
And I think that's a good word for anybody with a platform. And do people approach you with oh, I wish I had a marriage like you, if they hear I will be here, or
Oh
a faith
gosh.
like you do, because they might hear a song and you're like,
Yeah.
I'm a normal dude. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
how do you wrestle with maybe either not living up to the expectations that people may think, or,
Mm.
and I'm speaking to pastors and ministry leaders or anybody with a platform
Yeah.
here, of
Yeah.
maybe how to stay humble, or how to wrestle
Yeah.
with those things.
Man, I think just, yeah, being, keeping yourself in a place, community, relationally, with people who are very unimpressed and who know the truth about
Mm,
you and will help you keep from believing, your own hype. Um, because you know the truth. I mean, people will say
yeah.
to me, man, yeah, I wish if I could just, had a marriage like yours. And I try to be quick to say, you do not know what you're asking for or saying, because you ask my kids, on second thought, don't ask my kids, what, how they have watched their mother and father struggle and wrestle and, you know, lock horns and, holy headlock as opposed to holy wedlock, all that stuff. But because of God's grace and his faithfulness, we are still married, but it has been not easy. And the songs like I Will Be Here, if you listen to them, and you really listen to the words and realize, wait a minute, let me read between the lines. I will be here when you feel like being quiet, when you need to speak your mind. It's not always like, sweetheart, I have a word for you. Sometimes it's like, it's a little different than that. And speaking your mind or being quiet, interpreted silent treatment, those
Yeah.
kinds of things. I'm there. There's a lot behind those songs, and the very reason they're written, is with tears and great consternation of,
Mm,
are we even going to survive this? And lots of counselors and lots of counsel and um, And so, I think there's always this thing when we see someone on stage or we read somebody's book or we hear them speak or sing and we think, man, they must really have it together.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the great challenges of us in ministry, and it leads to some terrible falls, that we see throughout history, of some incredible leaders who allowed themselves to be in a place of people around them who wouldn't challenge, or who were yes people or
Right.
whatever,
Right.
to not have those relationships with people to say, man, I want you to know the real me and the real struggles and the real reality, of what I'm dealing with, and people who will know that and challenge us and just love us enough to say, I mean, I've got people in my life that are like, man, I love you and I think it's cool that you've written these songs. Yeah, that's really great, but I'm really not that impressed at all
Right.
with that. I
Right.
just I just want to know your heart, and how is your heart now? How is your marriage right now? I know it's probably a mess and I'm cool with that. Let's just talk about it, and how can I encourage you? How can I be a brother and a friend? And and then the honesty from the platform too.
Yep.
That's a scary, scary thing, but that's the most important. I mean, look at what scriptures have impacted my life the most of us the most. Psalms. It's not just when, the psalmist is saying, your love is better than life, heavens declare your glory, all these great. It's when the psalmist says, how long, O Lord? Are you going to forget me forever?
Yep.
I mean, declaring, confessing, I don't even know if God exist. I don't even know if God knows that I'm here.
Yep.
That kind of honesty draws me in to go, oh, you too?
Right.
I'm not alone,
Right.
or Paul saying, man, I am weak. I'm weak, but he's strong. So in his, in my weakness, his strength is made perfect. Man, I'm going to boast in my weakness. I'm like, who says that?
Right.
Well, only the apostle Paul. Maybe we should take some, cues from that kind of stuff in our ministry. And I think we're at our best when we do.
So I'm 41, so almost 20 years ago or so, I worked for a lady named Kay Arthur. She's a Bible study teacher,
Yes.
and so
Yep.
I directed her television program. And
Okay.
so she had a really big following, and a lot of ladies especially just kind of flocked to her, and I realized early
Yeah.
on that when we were producing the TV show, she wanted real feedback. Like, don't give me the fluff, the yes man. Like, although I'm very
Yeah.
grateful
Right.
for for that, like what we really need to do as we're digging in the dirt of ministry is like, I'm going to respect you more if you just hit me with the truth, not lay a lot of fluff on me.
Yes.
And so I was thankful to learn
Yeah.
that early on. But I think that that's very true in ministry, to find people around you that are not that impressed or that can give you the real
Yes.
feedback, or that can give you the honest answer, or, be real with you. So I think that's important. All
Yes.
right. So at our ministry, we do a lot of, our ministry is called Church Visuals. And so we do a lot of graphics and video content for churches and ministries and artists. So lyric videos and motion backgrounds and all the stuff that goes on screen. So I wanted to ask you about that. In your concerts and over the years, how important are the visuals that you have on stage, whether that's on screen with a video or with visual cues, or how important are the visuals to your concerts?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, I love them. They can definitely have a huge uh, impact in, how people can really be moved. How you can move an audience to consider what you really want and feel like, is the message you're wanting them to hear, to get. Um, I think, with me over the years, I've had big production tours,
Yeah.
um, and those have been amazing. But I've also had to deal with the reality that, and I've had, my people around me over the years, booking agents and and managers and different ones saying, I'm sitting out in the audience, and don't get so wrapped up in,
Right.
you know, in thinking that you got to create this huge production experience, because with what I do as an artist, and they'll encourage me to remember, because sometimes I can't, I'm like, oh man, it's gotta, I gotta take a semi truck out, and it just
Right.
doesn't make sense, the economics of it anymore
Right.
to do that. So am I giving people less of an experience if I can't give them a big visual experience? Now this current tour, I'm bringing out, some background stuff and screens and things, and putting together a really cool, experience enhances that in a really great way. And I love it. And I think in church ministry and church work, one of the things that I've seen in the last few years, it's really been, uh, incredible. I mean, we've become such a visual, I mean, phones and computers and, from where I started, 37 years ago with my concerts, it was just, the world was very different in terms of how much visual information we're, constantly getting, and how, even just how do we keep our attention focused, so
Hmm.
anything that helps, especially on a Sunday worship service or whenever it is, helps people focus in, I think is really great and very good, and I'm thankful for it. In church services, when you can just have things that really do help you focus, and even at the beginning of services where you have visuals that just help you really, okay, it helps me get my head, all the other noise shut out, and zero in, on what's happening, centered in on what this message. Those are great things to have, and a powerful tool. I think they're tools,
Right. Yep.
Um,
Exactly.
with what I, again, with what I do, sometimes it's a concert, just me and a stool, and taking people on that journey, and with the music, and I try to paint those pictures with, that's part of the way I write songs, is I'm trying to tell those stories, with the words and the song, and the just the lyrics. But it's a great tool, and I'm thankful for it, and I think it can be really a powerful thing used in a really effective way.
I know you've had a couple of videos over the year, like with Cinderella. I think you have a nice story video that goes with
Yes.
Cinderella and things like that that really help bring the message home, or tie the emotion to it, and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, couple quick hits for you as I leave you today. So I'm a big movie buff, and so I want to hit on a couple of projects that you've done recently. How did Baloo the bear come to you?
Yeah. Oh man, that was such a fun thing. So many years ago, I met a guy who works for Disney, and I think he's just retired from there. A believer, an amazing brother, and he was a big fan. And he and I were having lunch together out in L.A. At the Disney Studios, and he said over lunch, he's like, "Man, I'm looking for a new Baloo, voice of Baloo the bear. If you remember Jungle Book, which I was a huge fan of the Jungle Book when I was a kid, and my favorite was Baloo because he was cool, kind of had this sort of, deep South kind of, well, now little britches, he kind of had a cool swagger, and I was like, man, that's my guy. And Bare Necessities, was
Yeah.
kind of this cool sort of bluesy song, and so he said, I need a voice of Baloo the bear. Anybody? Who do you think? And I'm like, dude, you got to let me try. I would love to be Baloo the bear. And so I did an audition at that time. This was like, gosh, 20 plus years ago. And they were doing a Jungle Book reboot, like a Jungle Book 2. And at the last minute, John Goodman, the actor, came along and said, "Hey, I want to do that voice." So of course, he's a well-known,
You got beat
actor
out
and,
by
and
John
voice.
Goodman.
So I'm like, I got, I got beat out by John Goodman. So I'm like, I get it. No worries. So, but I did a video game, a Sony PlayStation game back in the day, and voiced Blue the Bear for that. Got to sing Bare Necessities in it and all this stuff. And so that was super cool. And then fast forward, so years later, just recently, about 2 years ago, uh, my friend calls me again, and we've become good friends over the years. And he said, "Hey, guess what?" He said, "Somebody, I just heard that we're doing a reboot of Chippendale's Rescue Rangers, and they're doing a movie, but it's like Adam Sandberg and Seth Rogen and all these guys are kind of coming together to do a Chippendale's Rescue Rangers live action sort of CGI combined with live action movie, and there's a little moment where Baloo the bear, they're bringing all these characters back in the movie, and they've got Baloo the bear has 2 or 3 scenes, and so they're looking for Baloo. And so I submitted your name. I'm like, well, man, this guy did it for us years ago, and he'd be great. And said, do you want to audition for it? And I'm like, are
Yeah.
you kidding?
Yeah.
Yes. So I got it. I got the part, and
Nice.
I got to be, I got to do Baloo the bear. It was
Nice.
awesome. Yeah, it was so fun.
All right, so one more. So there's this Netflix movie called A Week Away that you were involved
Yep.
in. And so this is kind of, for folks who don't know, this is kind of like a little teeny bopper camp kind of movie. And so if this was like
Like
20
High
years
School
ago,
Musical. Yeah.
it is. But if it was like 20 years ago, I was telling my family, we watched it. Like this would be the movie that would be on repeat in the student bus going to youth camp. Like that would be but it's
Yeah,
like this
totally.
weird musical that's made now, but it had songs from back in the day, Place in This World and Dive. And
I know.
how did that one happen?
Yeah. So I kept getting a call from this good buddy, guy named Gabe Vasquez, who was working on the movie, and I've known him from the music world for years, and he's like, hey, he was calling my manager. He said, man, we're making this movie about it's summer camp movie, and we're bringing back songs like Great Adventure, Dive, Place in This World, Baby Baby, Amy Grant's Baby Baby, and then a few new songs as well. But we're he's like, and it's like, think High School Musical meets summer camp. I mean, it's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
choreography, and
yeah.
we got the guys that choreograph those movies, and I mean, it's great music. The music is great. The reboots of these songs are like really cool modern versions. And in my mind, I got to confess, I was going, man, that is going to be like cheese upon cheese,
Yeah.
topped with cheese. I'm like, there's no way this is not going to be not good. And so I kept thinking, but I know Gabe, he's a good friend, and I want to do this, but I'm like, man, and he's like, we want Steve, would Steven come and do a cameo in the movie? And I'm like, man, I just don't know. And he kept asking, and finally he said, would Steven be willing to watch just like a 5-minute trailer
Hmm.
of one of his songs and how it's done? And so I'm like, yeah, absolutely. I'd be happy to. So he sent me this little clip, and I watched a little bit of the dance for Dive and the song, and I
Yeah.
went, my goodness, this is going to be great.
Yeah.
I'm in. So I end up going out, and I'm going to tell you what, I think they crushed it. I thought the production was incredible. The story was great. It was, it was well done.
Yeah.
It's fun. It's campy. It's all that stuff, but it's so well done that you gotta just kind of respect it. And the story was great, and the way they even just presented the whole message, I thought was it wasn't heavy handed. It wasn't like, now is the big moment when the bells are going to ring and everybody's going to fall on their knees and pray this prayer. And as great as that is when that happens, it's like, it's not always the way it happens in real
Right.
life. And
Right.
I just felt like they did all that really well. And I was blown away with it. So I'm like, I'm all in, man. And my kids watched it. My grandkids watched it. They loved it. They're
Yeah.
like, this is really good,
Yeah.
So
Well,
anyway,
I'm not their
I was proud
target
of
audience, definitely, but I was like, I should not like this, but it's good. All right, last question for you.
I know.
All
I
right.
agree. Totally.
All right, rapid fire last question. Last year you celebrated
Okay.
50 number ones. Your 50th number one radio single, Don't Lose Heart. All right, so what single
Yeah.
from those 50 were you most surprised that went to number one? What were you shocked over the years?
Probably, I mean, I guess the very first one, His Eyes. I
Mm.
mean, the idea that I would ever have a song go to number one on the radio charts, was a pretty far-fetched idea.
Yeah.
So I think that first one was like just the most surprising to me, that wow, this is actually possible for a kid from Paducah, Kentucky to get a number one song.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, man, I appreciate your depth as a believer. I appreciate that, man, you're a genuine dude trying to live out your faith, and you can tell that through your art and all that. So, man, thank you for your faithfulness, and man, really appreciate the time today.
Thank you. Well, appreciate you and what you do, and it's great work there, encouraging worship leaders and people in ministry. So keep that up. We need it desperately, and so bless you, man. Thanks for the time.
You got it. All right. Tour dates all around the country. If you're a ministry leader, take your church group to go see Steven. Tour dates and tickets at stevencurtischapman.com. This has been a podcast presentation of Church Visuals, executive produced by Carl Barnhill, edited by AJ Schubert, title and show graphics by Angie Lomas. For more resources to help you visually communicate the gospel, visit churchvisuals.com.